Hi everyone, thank you very much for having me here today. Apologise, I have some notes next to me because it has lots of figures in and I'm really bad at remembering figures, to be honest. So I've been asked to share some of my insights from Scotland and what we're doing in terms of the circular economy, especially linked to tourism. Circular tourism is not a term that's kind of arrived in Scotland yet, but circular economy, very much has. We were one of the first countries in the world to have a government strategy on circular economy, so it's something we're very familiar with. And tourism has a fundamental role to play in many of our circular economy principles and strategies and initiatives that we've been developing. So firstly, about the organisation that I work for Zero Waste Scotland. We are a not-for-profit environmental organisation. We're funded by the Scottish Government with a little bit of funding also from the European Regional Development Fund. And our goal really is to influence policy, use evidence and insight to kind of motivate individuals and businesses to really embrace the environmental side of circular economy, but also the social side and the economic side as well. So I'll start off by telling you a little bit about tourism in Scotland and the latest statistics, so you can get an understanding of the challenges that we face in creating circular tourism destination. Last year we had over 15.5 million visitors to Scotland. This was a 3% increase from 2017. The total expenditure from these visitors was 5.1 billion, so it's a lot of money they're spending in our country. We want to make sure we're giving something back, but at the same time that we're being as sustainable as possible when they're visiting. August has always been and continues to be the peak month for visitors. I think that's because they presume that it's going to be sunny then, but it's probably not, just to let you know, in case you ever want to go. And there has been some changes we noticed as well in the statistics that were published. So these were for 2018. So the number of visitors taking part in tour operator activities, especially coach tours, has significantly increased by 9%. And self-catering saw the biggest growth in terms of accommodation providers. And I'll speak about those two a bit later on and the influence that they've had in terms of the challenges that we're facing. So when I was asked to come speak about circular tourism and the role that the tourists and residents can play in promoting a circular tourism destination, I thought I have to look at the tourist journey first of all, and how the tourist journey, they can influence each part on their journey to kind of get involved in a circular tourism concept. So from booking travel to actually staying in the destination, to eating in the destination and participating in activities, there's a number of ways that we have tried to engage with tourists and residents to really kind of incorporate our circular economy ideas and adopt those during their stay. Unfortunately, it's probably not time to focus on all of these, so I've chosen accommodation, food and activities as I feel they're the ones I can really share a lot with you on today. So first of all, in terms of accommodation, so when it comes to Scotland, there's an abundance of locations to stay, but Visit Scotland, which is Scotland's National Tours Board, has come up with a scheme called Walkers Welcome or Cyclists Welcome. There's also Anglers Welcome and Golfers Welcome. And the idea of this scheme is that businesses who want to make a difference and adopt some changes within their business to accommodate these type of visitors who are going to enjoy the sustainable activities will be recognised for it. And these badges on the top two on the right here, they'd receive these badges to show that they've participated and made a step in the right direction to promoting a sustainable form of transport. And to be part of this scheme, the businesses have to meet certain criteria. So in the case of walkers and cyclists, the provider must give some information on public transport suitable for walkers to reach different walking routes. For cyclists, the public transport must be able to carry bicycles. They must have a supply of local route information on different forms of cycling or walking. And they must be willing to refill water bottles free of charge. and they must offer an early breakfast option from 7 a.m. That's just a few of them. There are a number of other ones, and if they meet all those different criteria, they'll be awarded with the badge. And what that badge encourages people to do, and tourists who are visiting the area, is to stay with these businesses who've actually actively made a difference and are trying to accommodate their sustainable activity that they've chosen to do. And the last logo shown here is of the Green Tourism Business Scheme. So this is a scheme across the UK. It's an accredited scheme where a business will receive an award, either bronze, silver, or gold, depending on their kind of journey on the sustainability line. So businesses will have made some sort of reduction in energy, waste, or water, but will have also made an improvement in terms of biodiversity, made a difference to the community and social inclusion. And if they receive this award, it encourages tourists to look, basically, for these hotels that show this award and has somewhere to stay. So it's really pointing it right in their face to say, look, we've done this, and come and stay with us. But obviously that depends on people's behaviour and tourists actually actively looking for kind of the green logo, which we hope more and more people are going to be able to do. So moving on to food. Food and drink is currently the team that I work in with Zero Waste Scotland. So food waste is a bit of a passion of mine at the moment. And I talk about food because food and drink is an integral part of the visitor's experience. So Visit Scotland did a survey last year and found that 66% of our visitors say that food is important when visiting a holiday destination. And visitors to Scotland spend £1 billion a year on food and drink. And the relationship between food and tourism has been recognised as a real opportunity for development, and the first food tourism action plan was launched at the end of last year. And the plan is to increase food tourism to 2 billion by 2030. But obviously with this, we have to make sure it's as sustainable as possible. 1 in 6 meals in the hospitality sector in the UK is still being wasted, which is a significant amount. And the Scottish Government last year recognised that we needed to do something about this and set a target very ambitiously to reduce food waste by 33% by 2025. This is one of the most ambitious targets in the world. Myself and my colleagues are working on the 6-year plan that you can download online and see what challenges we have to face in actually accomplishing this. But tourists have their role to play as well. Food and tourism, such an integral part of reducing kind of food waste. So I'm going to tell you about a few of the schemes in a moment. But first of all, you've already seen this diagram today, but at least it's not the butterfly alumnicar for one. So it's important to know what the food waste hierarchy is and where we want to be on it. So in terms of a linear economy, we'd be right at the bottom. It'd be disposal, which is going to landfill. Composting is great. I know a number of people have talked about it, and it's wonderful. But at the end of the day, where we really want to be is prevention, so preventing that food from becoming waste in the first place. So some of the schemes that tourists can get involved in, I'm going to share with you now. So the Good to Go scheme, this is a nationally recognised scheme that started in 2016, and it's to reduce the amount of plate waste, so good food left on a customer's plate at the end of the day. And currently, 53,000 tonnes of food is wasted from the hospitality sector in Scotland. This costs £64 million a year, so a substantial amount of money. 2/3 of this food could be saved, and it's estimated about 34% is towards plate waste. So this scheme encourages tourists and residents to take their leftover food home with them that's on their plate. So if businesses sign up to this scheme, they'll receive 300 free compostable boxes that you can see in the photo. They'll receive 300 stickers, which are Food Safety Scotland stickers. They'll receive posters, they'll receive table toppers. And the purpose of this is to really really shove it in people's faces, basically, that they should be taking their food home and not to be scared to ask for essentially a doggy bag, because it is a bit of a taboo subject, and people are scared. But at the end of the day, that business, well, in Scotland, the business has to pay for their waste to be uplifted, so it's really only benefiting them and yourself, because you get an extra meal the next day, if you're going to take that food waste home. Or food home, I should say, it's not waste yet. So if people were to do this, the study showed that 800,000 meals across Scotland would be saved, and tourists are fundamental in making this scheme work, as well as the residents. If they're not going to ask for something to take their food home in, it is just going to go to waste. Another scheme that we have, it's a large campaign that's been running for many years, Love Food, Hate Waste. This is a recognised brand, this symbol, the little red circle. It's a national consumer campaign to raise awareness, basically, of the need to reduce food waste and help people take action. So there's a dedicated website for Love Food, Hate Waste that has a number of blogs and recipes, guides and advice, with one of the latest ones being tips to avoid wasting food before heading off on holiday. But this also works for tourists when they're on holiday. So I mentioned earlier that there's been a substantial increase in the number of people staying in self-catering accommodation. So a guide like this would be very useful to them in deciding what to do with their food at the end of their holiday. Not just before they go on holiday, which is also significant. A recent study by Hubbub and Unilever showed that 59% of people throw away the majority of food in their fridge before they go on holiday. But on the other side of that, 91% said they would be more than happy to give it to a neighbour or redistribute it. So there's obviously some sort of disalignment there, and the reason they're not doing it. So Scotland has come up with a new concept. I think it's done in other countries too, but we're just starting to really develop it, called the Community Fridge Network. So the first community fridge was put on the Isle of Mull in 2018, and Scotland now has 7 fridges. It's not a vast amount, but the programme only started last year and it is growing. And basically a community fridge, if anyone has any leftover food, as long as it's sealed or unopened, they can go and put it in the community fridge in their area, and anybody can then come along and take the food, whether that's a single person that actually buying food from the supermarket, they'd end up wasting more because they've bought in bulk, or whether some people are in food poverty. So it not only reduces food waste, but it's also encouraging community ownership. Is bringing people together, it's reducing social isolation. We mentioned before that circular economy has to include a social aspect as well. And this is an example of kind of a circular idea that really embraces encouraging a positive social impact. And finally, in terms of food, we have the Taste Our Best accreditation. So this is an accreditation across the whole of Scotland. There's 1,000 food providers that have this accreditation. It basically shows that a food provider is serving local quality food and drink. And the aim from the Food Tourism Action Plan is to have the top 100 visitor attractions in Scotland to have this accreditation. By shopping local, you're supporting local jobs, you're supporting the local economy. That money is then being invested back into the local economy. It's kind of circular economy in its simplest form. And Scotland has an abundance of kind of local food and drink to share, from haggis, from whiskey to craft beer, salmon. We want to shout about all of those, and in order for tourists to get involved, this logo is recognised nationally to point out that that restaurant is serving locally sourced food, and it encourages them to go there as opposed to somewhere that's bought their food from somewhere overseas. So moving on to activities. So if tourists are to adopt kind of circular tourist activities or ones that fit that concept, it's first important to recognise the challenges that Scotland faces and tourists face when coming to the area. So these pictures show some of the challenges. I've already mentioned the weather. The weather in Scotland isn't great in winter. It's not actually that great in summer, to be honest, either. But that obviously influences when people are going to come to the area, and it obviously influences what activities they're going to participate in. And it means that over 2/3 of our tourists come in the summer months, which places kind of a big onus on the resources at that time. Scotland, as part of the UK as a whole, is an island, so unfortunately, unless you take the boat, you do have to fly, and most people do fly. And because of this, it encourages people to want to see everything in one go. They think an island, it's small, I'll just whip around it and see all the top destinations in no time. And on top of that, we have a really, really diverse landscape. So although I'm slightly biased, Scotland is a beautiful country, from the coasts, which I've shown here, to the mountains, to the beautiful cities, and to the historical, cultural sites. There's so much to see in one go that people do think they're going to be able to do it all. And that presents a challenge of kind of overcrowding and over-tourism. And then finally, the single-track roads. So as you go further north in Scotland, single-track roads become more and more common. And you can imagine public transport isn't great up in the north of Scotland. It is there, but it's not the most reliable for moving about. So a lot of people take the car. And if you can imagine on this middle picture, a number of cars trying to pull into the passing spaces. It's not a pleasant experience. So this has resulted in over-tourism, so massive concentration of visitors at really, really popular sites in the peak seasons. So the top right picture here is of the Isle of Skye in August. If any of you plan on going to Skye in August, I'd avoid it, because this is probably what you'll see at the moment. Unfortunately, that's going through a bit of a crisis with over-tourism at the moment. Skye, someone asked me the other day what the population of Skye is. It's 10,000, but it has over 650,000 visitors a year. So it's quite a substantial ratio in terms of its population. And 1 in 8 kind of houses in Skye is let out as an Airbnb. We also have the issue that, as I mentioned, due to the kind of diverse landscape and people wanting to see everything, they're spending a really, really short amount of time in one place, potentially spending very little money and then moving on. We have our tick box tourists who just have a list of the attractions that they want to see, which they've usually taken from social media, and they move on, they take their picture and they go. And I mentioned before there was a rise in tour operator activities, especially coach tours that try and encompass kind of the whole of the Highlands in one go. So this has presented a lot of problems, and it's not the kind of tourism we want to encourage. So although everybody's kind of mentioned growth and they want a number of tourists, I would say that we don't want to encourage more and more tourists. What we want to do is change the kind of tourists that are coming to visit us. And we've kind of adopted recently in Scotland this concept of slow tourism. So this was a notion that was derived from an academic paper by 2 guys in the University of Highlands and Islands. And they basically formed this concept of slow tourism to encourage visitors to the area to go to the less developed areas, to really slow down and embrace the one destination that they were visiting. To spend longer in an area, to experience its culture, its music, its art, and really immerse themselves in a community. So very much like slow food, taking your time to cook, it's very much the same, taking your time to enjoy the environment that you're in. And really just go off the beaten track and don't follow kind of what everyone else is doing in the top 5 visitor destinations. The photos I show here, I picked of, I thought I'd show ones of myself embracing the slow tourism concept. So the top right photo is of December last year, climbing one of the Munros in Scotland. It's not the time anyone would choose to climb a Munro, but as you can see, it was a beautiful day. We saw one other person on the hills and was really able to just embrace the activity. It took us the whole day, but we absolutely loved it. And it meant if we'd done that in the summer, there would have been hundreds of people on those hills. And then the other photo, stand-up paddleboarding. I took up stand-up paddleboarding 2 years ago, and it's an amazing way to see the lochs in Scotland. That you see kind of images and things that you just wouldn't see from the roadside, to be honest. So what we want to do is encourage tourists to take part in these slow activities or slow adventures. And businesses have adopted these concepts and promoted themselves as slow adventure products. So SkyTime, I mentioned Sky before, and its issue with over-tourism. So it recently did a campaign called SkyTime, which encourages tourists to stay longer, see less, and experience more. And I've put up just 2 of the businesses that have adapted themselves, have kind of advertised themselves, essentially, to become slow adventure businesses. So the first one is of the Isle of Skye Seaweed Company, which is run by a young guy who decided he wanted to bring an ancient industry back to Skye in terms of seaweed. So Skye, being an island abundant in seaweed, he decided he could turn this into natural skincare products. So this is bringing a sense of culture back to the area, and it was also, it was made in Skye. So alongside this, he decided to create the kind of branding Skye Made, and issued this out to the rest of the business in Skye that made things themselves. So again, it's providing that input to the local economy and really promoting local. And that's something that if you just visited the kind of top 5 destinations, you wouldn't get to see on Skye. And similarly, Skye Weavers. So a young couple decided they wanted to bring back the old tradition of weaving to Skye and started producing hats and throws and scarves. And they really welcome visitors. So you can go there and look at the traditional process of weaving and actually get involved in weaving yourself. So it's really, as I mentioned before, embracing the culture of the area and getting involved in the communities, not something you'd do if you were just taking pictures and going. And some areas that we've started to work on in Scotland, we've circular cities and regions, is through a programme that we started in 2017. It's a programme that Zero Waste Scotland runs. We chose 4 areas in Scotland, 2 cities, so Edinburgh and Glasgow, and 2 regions, Tayside and the North East. And the idea was to work in these areas to create a kind of local circular economy strategy. And this would give a local ownership of the circular economy, and it would really kind of showcase that particular area and what it can do in terms of the circular economy. So I'll share one with you and what we've been doing. So Circular Glasgow was the first kind of circular city on this project. We started off with a circular scan to identify the sectors that would really benefit from kind of promotion and growing in terms of circular economy. And these areas were healthcare, education, and food and drink manufacturing. And since its conception, we supported over 650 businesses. And you might be asking how this relates to tourists. Well, businesses are driven by tourism, by residents that stay there. They create the market at the end of the day. So by having these businesses that are striving to make a difference in terms of circular economy, tourists can actively see that people are making a difference and choose where they're going to spend their money. And by having kind of concepts like this and a branding of Circular Glasgow, it really points out to them and encourages them to do so. So 4 of the businesses I wanted to share with you. So the Glasgow Coffee Festival, it was the first festival globally to ban disposable cups, saving 18,000 cups a year. Festivals, obviously a very popular destination for tourists. Since then, Glasgow has decided it wants to also be a sustainable event destination. 3 million visitors come to Glasgow for its festivals and events every year, and it's about 1 kilogram a day of waste per visitor. So to become a sustainable event destination would be really significant for them. Jaw Brew is a family brewery in Glasgow, which partnered with a local bakery called Olds to basically create award-winning beer. from unsold bread. Again, something that's very popular with tourists and has been marketed in that way. And St Enoch Centre is a very large shopping centre in Glasgow. It collects all the waste coffee grounds from its shopping mall and food and drink retailers and uses it to condition the soil for the centre's plants. Again, this is something that they shout about, and hopefully tourists can see that and make that influence behaviour changes in them. I won't go on to the last one because I know I'm running out of time. So I'll quickly tell you about some other schemes as well, because I realised I didn't have time to shout about it all. So I'd really encourage you to go onto Zero Waste Scotland's website and look what they're doing in terms of circular economy and everything that relates to circular tourism. So some other schemes that I'll run through with you, which I think tourists can play a very large role in, is DRS. So Scotland has recently well, they've come up with a strategy for their deposit return scheme. It's going to launch in 2021. So this is going to be for plastic bottles. If people return them to a store or a retailer, they'll get 20p. That scheme is not going to be successful without the 15.5 million tourists that visit to actually get involved in it as well. Revolve stores. So in studies a while back, one of the reasons for people not shopping in second-hand stores was that they didn't quite believe in the quality and they weren't sure what they're getting. So we came up with quality standards for second-hand shop. It's quite a rigorous process they have to go through, but it encourages people to shop there because they know they're getting quality second-hand goods. And we've now got 150 stores across Scotland, and we would encourage tourists and residents to first of all look in these stores before shopping elsewhere. We also have the plastic carrier bag charge. At the moment, it's 5p a bag, but there's an open consultation at the moment to increase this to 10p with the number of shoppers we get to our large cities. Again, something that residents, we want them to take on board and embrace, and tourists, sorry. And finally, it was mentioned before by David, our water filling stations. We have 16 filling stations across Scotland at the moment, and we encourage everybody to try and use a reusable bottle. And Scotland's tap water, again, I'm biased, but it's amazing. It's some of the best in the world. I'll keep saying that. But it really is. And we want, obviously, our tourists to embrace that as much as possible as well. Sorry, I know I ran over time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much.